I cannot escape my fate.
I saw The Northman this week, and I thought it was great. However, it does have some major thematic flaws. I thought it was awesome visually. Visually, this movie is insane. It is so visceral and, I don't want to say welcoming, but if you love this kind of time period, you'll definitely love this movie. Not only because of its visuals and its actual showing of representations of physical and spiritualized representations of Norse mythology. You'll love the material culture. There is a lot of real things that we know from archaeology and that we get from history books and we get from real life history of Norsemen, not Vikings, because there's a whole history with that word. But basically, there is combs, there's rings, there's the arms and armor are correct. And with me and how I freak about arms and armors all the time, it's brilliant. This movie is really, really brilliant in its representations of the time period in which these people lived and what their belief systems were, what their mythological representations would have looked like to these people. I really loved how they did that. They also went a step further in representing other cultures within those things. One of the major examples is, yes, they have the Viking stick and ball game that I'm not going to try to pronounce right now, but they do have a great representation of one of the slaves' cultures within that. There's an Irish slave in the story, and what does he do with the stick and ball? He uses his elements of what he knows from his upbringing. He uses the stick as a hurley, as you can see here, and the ball as a slither. He puts the ball onto the stick and tries to do a spin move. Unfortunately, that leads to his being knocked out by a massive guy, who I think actually is played by the Mountain from Game of Thrones. But anyway, there are a lot of great representations of physical and material and spiritual culture that we have in this film. There's also a lot of great visuals overall in this movie. It's just so ethereal and fantastical, and at the same time it really grounds you within this world because it is so beautiful. I think it was filmed in Ireland. It was supposed to be set in Iceland. It might have been filmed there as well too, I'm not really sure, but you just see how beautiful the world is and how these people were so entrenched within the world and how the world spoke to them and how it influenced their belief systems. And it's so beautiful to see the different variations on the screen. And I mean, we see a crazy volcano duel at the end. It's in the trailers, and it's pretty great how it ends. However, it could have been better. I think, unfortunately, due to the massive amount of white supremacy that is so focused on Norse mythology and its massively toxic masculine proportions or representations of it in the media, I think Sjón and Robert Eggers, as their directors and writers, wanted to stray away from that as far as possible. But in that trying to stay away from it, they still kind of, I don't want to say welcomed it, but still approached it. There is a point in which this character, Amleth, who the whole story is that he's trying to take revenge on his uncle for killing his father, usurping his throne and marrying his mother. It is, if that sounded very similar to Hamlet, you're right. The original story that, this is the original story that Shakespeare took and made his own sub-creation, to use the Tolkien quote. So you get Amleth, H, put at the beginning, it's Hamlet. So he took that story, but going off on a tangent, unfortunately there is a lot of white supremacy and toxic masculinity surrounding Norse mythology. And to have a film where it's majorly pushed out as this big, wide, epic kind of thing, and while the theme is supposed to be, this continuation of perpetuating violence on men and the women that surround them and how it affects those women and how it affects those men negatively, could have been approached in a different way, especially how the film ends. Because we're so used to how the film ends in other stories, that it would have been more interesting to see a subversion where the character chooses that he can have his cake and eat it too, where he chooses the safe path instead of the dangerous path, which ultimately leads to a danger on his personhood, I should say. So I think that there could have been a much more impactful ending if Robert Eggers and Sjón really wanted to make that impact. But overall, I just thought it was a brilliant movie, except for its major failing in trying to expel the ideas of that massive, massive elephant in the room when you talk about Norse mythology, Norse history, and studies overall.